Welcome, Secular Fam. Thank you for joining us today for our Secular Speaker Series, aka Rage Friday. Although I do feel like this one is going to give us some hope because we are about to talk to a really fantastic national advocacy organization doing really important work. I hope that all of you are staying engaged here and with your democracy and letting your voice be heard. I know that there is a March for Our Kids event in Tucson on March 30th. But if you do know of any other events or actions this weekend, please put them in the chat. Standing committees are over for this legislative session, but our legislators still need your support. So keep an eye out for our newsletter for more details and which bills you need to weigh in on. We do also have a few events happening this month and next. On April 5th and 6th, we will be at one of my favorite events, the Rainbows Festival at Heritage Square. And on May 7th, we will start our Logger with a Lawyer series of events. The focus of the first one will be to answer your concerns and questions about what is happening on the national level with attacks on the Constitution and rule of law. However, no questions about individual cases can be asked. This is a fundraiser series, and many of you enjoy these weekly discussions, so consider reaching out to 5 of your friends this week to join our movement, attend our events, and support the important work that we do. But for today, I am so excited. I crossed paths with this organization, sometime in the whirlwind that was last year, and I'm really excited. Today, we're going to be speaking with Jaclyn Friedman. She is the founder and executive director of EducateUs, where she's building a movement for universal sex education. A lifelong activist, advocate, and organizer, Friedman's work globally popularized the affirmative consent standard of sexual consent. So important. Her first book, Yes Means Yes, Visions of Female Sexual Power and a World Without Rape, was one of Publisher Weekly's top 100 books of 2009 and has inspired new laws in 5 US states, as well as policies on countless campuses across the country and across the world. So did I miss anything from that very impressive bio?
Oh my gosh, please, it's fine. What, even if you did, it's really all right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here with you all fighting the good fight in Arizona. I really appreciate being here with you in solidarity. And hopefully I can be helpful in some ways. So we're going to be talking about sex ed. We're going to be talking a little bit about what is in sex ed and why it matters as much as it does, and also what we can do to be stronger and more effective advocates for it. So just a little overview of Educate Us and what we do. We do power building with state and local sex ed advocacy orgs like Secular AZ, and help organizations and advocates just be more effective at the advocacy work they're doing on issues related to sex education in your own communities. So if that's something you would like support with, that's one thing that we love to do. We love to mobilize passionate individuals and turn them into sex ed advocates. So if you're not already in the movement for sex ed, can consider this an invitation. We help pro-sex ed candidates get elected to school boards specifically. We are a 501c4 organization, so we do direct endorsements and support for candidates. So if you ever have a candidate, so I know Jeannie has been incredible at sending us great candidates, but please keep sending them. And then we also work to change the narrative about sex education so that more people understand what it is and why it matters. So I want to start by getting a sense of who's in the room and what are you hearing about sex ed in your communities? What do you know about sex ed in communities? What kind of misinformation is floating around about sex ed that you're hearing? What are you not sure if it's true or not? What kind of attacks are you hearing on sex ed? Would love just to get a little temperature check on what you hear about this issue where you live. You can put that right in the chat.
And I see some folks here who show up at our state legislature on the regular, so I have a feeling this is an informed group. One thing that I'm thinking of right now is that we have a bill that is going through the legislature. I don't know where it is actually in the process right now, but it's a bill that wouldn't promote comprehensive sex education, but that would mandate that you have to focus like a certain amount of time on fetal development, like
Oh,
to
this is
talk
a
about,
baby Olivia bill. Yes.
it has a name.
A lot of times these bills that are sort of stealth anti-abortion bills masquerading as sex ed bills, they mandate the showing of a particular video about a mythological fetus named Baby Olivia. So that's where the name comes from. Yes.
Oh, that's adorable. Um, let's see. Here's Janie. She says, secular AZ has taught me that rather than diluting my capacity for support and action, I can. Oh,
Oh, that's
okay. Well, she's supporting us,
excellent.
but yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
there's a link to the info about Baby Olivia.
That's great. Another thing that I hear a lot of times is like, um, that our kids don't need to be learning. If you do this, if you teach kids about sexuality, their own sexuality, all they're going to want to do is have sex. And, we know that that couldn't be further from the truth. But that narrative, they drive that narrative and they say it so frequently that the people in their camp believe it, even though they're going against what they say they want for kids.
Yeah, so we see a wide variety of attacks. We see sex ed is attacked as obscenity or pornography. We're going to be talking more about that when we talk about Project 2025. And in fact, there's a bill moving in Georgia right now that would ban obscenity in the school curriculum, which is targeting sex education. Anytime you hear about bans on obscenity or age restrictions on pornography, you should immediately think that they also mean sex ed. And people they do it because you're not thinking about sex ed when they say that, and it seems like sure kids shouldn't see pornography, but they mean sex education. They also call it parents' rights, as you were saying, like parents should be doing this at home. Look, we don't expect parents to teach calculus at home, right? Like we don't expect parents to teach English literature. It actually requires skill and knowledge to teach sex ed effectively in a way that young people learn what they need to know. And also, most parents, if you ask them they think about it, don't actually want to teach it because it's very awkward to teach your own kid about it. Oh, there's an attack on gender studies on the Fairfax Education Board, parents' rights, book bans. Um, a lot of people feel that sex education will encourage young people to have sex or promote LGBTQ people, like make people gay or trans. Um, which of course is not how it works. Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely contrary to Christian nationalism, and we'll get to that actually. It is, they attack it correctly as antithetical to their values. It is antithetical to Christian nationalist values. So when we look at the benefits of sex ed, there are so many that don't get talked about. So young people are more likely to report that they're being abused, to have the language to report that they're being abused when they get sex education, which makes sense. They know the language of body parts and things have been destigmatized and they know what's okay and what's not okay and what they have the right to expect. We know it reduces perpetration of intimate partner and sexual violence. It increases bystander interventions. It makes young people more likely to intervene if they see somebody being harassed or attacked. It affirms everybody's sexual and gender identity and diversity. It creates a safer school environment. It reduces bullying, which we're going to also talk about. It creates healthier relationships. It reduces beliefs in patriarchal values, which is one of the reasons they attack it. And it even improves academic performance, which makes sense when you think about how if you're in a safer school, you can actually relax and focus on your studies. And that's because sex ed actually contains many, many more topics than most people think that it does. Part of the challenge we have on this issue is that most of us got either bad or inadequate sex education. And so our imaginations are kind of stunted about what we mean when we say sex education. I just dropped the link to this chart in the chat so people can look at it at leisure. This is the national sex ed standards. I promise you, there is no curriculum this complete in Arizona being taught in public schools. But this is what national organizations, the experts think should be taught in every grade. I also promise you there's no school in Arizona that's teaching stuff that's not in this chart, right? That's beyond the confines of this. And so if you hear all kinds of talk about, I hear all kinds of things. Oh, they're teaching this inappropriate stuff in third grade. It's just not happening. And it can be really useful. We made this chart because it's really useful when you're talking to folks who are in place of fear or panic about sex ed to see like what are we really teaching young people and what does age appropriate look like? We're not talking about actual sex at the kindergarten levels, but we are preparing young people to have bodily autonomy. Um, Please feel free to. The actual true story of this chart is I was listening in on a focus group of like parents of middle schoolers talking about their feelings about sex ed, and somebody said, "Oh, they're teaching third graders. I think it was fisting." And they were like, I saw it on a PDF that my friend sent me, and I thought, well, we could have a PDF. Like, oh, do we need a PDF? Great, let's make a PDF. Um, yeah, it sounds like you all are all on top of it. So please feel free to share this chart far and wide. That is my dream for it. But beyond the impacts on individual students, sex education has a much larger impact. So um, it's really hard oftentimes to get past the individualism argument because when we talk about individualism, parents think, "Oh, I don't need to worry about this because my kid's not going to have sex," and or I don't have kids, my kids aren't in school, it's not my issue. And that's a problem with keeping it as an individualist argument, like it's good for kids. It's like people who don't have school age kids think it's not their issue. But when we broaden it out, it's actually a fundamental democratic issue, and an issue for bodily autonomy, as I think some people are already articulating in the chat. So sex ed is a key to reproductive freedom, just to start in the obvious place. It reduces, correction, it reduces gender-based violence. Many students, it's the first and best information they're going to get on menstruation, on birth control, on how to get it, on STI prevention, pregnancy options, abortion. And it is more critical than ever now that federal abortion rights have been undermined. I know you all took a big step forward recently on abortion rights, which we love, but you can't access those abortion rights if you don't know how to access them, right? And sex ed is a huge piece of that. And it's also destigmatizing and reduces vulnerability to Christian nationalist propaganda on reproductive freedom. So I'm sure that we have them here in Massachusetts. I'm sure you have an issue with crisis pregnancy centers, masquerading as repro care. If young people are raised to understand their bodies and how they work, they're less susceptible to that sort of misinformation. So that's truly just the start, though, because we believe very deeply that sex ed is a key to building healthy communities and democracy. And I am constantly saying community is the antidote to fascism. So this is like truly fundamental. So, as we already talked about, good sex education, the kind provided for in that PDF, it reduces beliefs in patriarchal values, it increases support for LGBTQ folks, just increases empathy and respect, decreases bullying, increases bystander intervention. All this stuff, you can read this slide just the same as I can. I won't read the whole thing to you. All the sort of building blocks of democracy uh, are laid out in sex ed, which is why authoritarians hate it, right? Which is why
Mm-hmm.
Christian
Mm-hmm.
nationalists hate it. And it also, by the way, is a great issue to engage young people in local elections, right? If you tell young
Mm-hmm.
people what you should vote for school board because school board is where sex ed gets decided, what gets taught in sex ed is decided, young people want to vote for school board.
Mm-hmm.
And if young people, if we're worried about, as I am, young people feeling really disillusioned with the political process, this is a great place to get folks re-engaged. Um,
Do you see
right.
that? I would like to see more about signaling for help. I want to know more of what I should be aware of.
I don't know what
That's
that means.
I don't that's comment from James. So yeah.
James, could you say more about what that question is about? I'd be happy to answer it.
Oh, I
And
bet it's maybe it's from the PDF that you shared with everybody.
I don't think the phrase signaling for help is in there.
Mm-mm. I heard about hand signals.
Hand signals? I don't know what kind of hand signals you mean.
He'll get back to us in the chat. Go ahead with your, yeah.
You can do a screenshot of the chart if you want, Jamie, but you can just have the chart.
You can download it. Yeah.
You can just have it. Have it, have it. Um, are they accepted by the US Department of Education? That's a great question. The federal government actually does not regulate sex education at all, which at the moment is probably for the best. Um, so the US Department of Ed doesn't weigh in on the national sex ed standards. Most sex ed policy gets decided at the state and local level. You will sometimes see, and we will almost certainly see with his administration, grants that incentivize schools, that reimburse schools, or give money to schools to teach abstinence propaganda in schools. We have long fought for there to be a bill under Democratic presidents and administrations that gives schools money to teach the kind of sex ed that's in the national sex ed standards. We've never gotten that passed before. But it's all down to incentives. It's not officially adopted by any federal departments. There are hand signals given when people or children are endangered. Yeah, I don't know. I've heard about this, but I don't know much about it. Um, can I say more about reducing patriarchal beliefs? Yeah, sure. I mean, good sex education teaches us that we have the right to control our own bodies, and so does everybody else around us, that we're all co-equal humans, and that our rights begin and end where other people's bodies begin and end, and their rights to sort of give and receive consent. And that is profoundly egalitarian across gender lines, which obviously runs antithetical to patriarchal beliefs. So just the fundamentals of bodily autonomy really undermines patriarchal beliefs. Um, so, the reason also that we know that sex ed has power beyond the individual is why we also know that our opposition has been investing it for decades. So, like I said, they've been using our federal tax dollars to fund abstinence programs for decades. Every time there's a Republican president, there's money passed to incentivize schools to teach abstinence propaganda. You will notice I don't call that abstinence only sex education. I don't think it's education. I think it's propaganda. It's actually a disinformation campaign most of the time. So I don't dignify it by calling it education. But they will call it education when they want to. Um, so we know that they've been investing in it. You know, that's been happening since the 90s. It's also see why we've seen a huge spike in anti-sex ed legislation at the state and local level in recent years, including some of the attacks you all were describing earlier. And then we have to talk about what's in Project 2025. They haven't done this yet, but they've been doing a lot of stuff in Project 2025, so there's no reason to believe they're not going to try and get to this. There are plans in Project 2025 to ban sex ed outright. Now, you will notice if you've read Project 2025 that it doesn't say the word sex education. It actually says pornography and obscenity, and it calls for a pornography ban and for people who provide pornographic materials to minors to be registered as sex offenders. Um,
Mhm.
they mean sex education. They also mean
Mhm.
pornography, probably. They also, by the way, mean anything that acknowledges trans people are real. Um, but when you see them talk about pornography and banning pornography, I need you to understand whatever your personal feelings are about actual pornography, they mean sex education. We've seen this play out at the state and local level over and over again. They call sex ed pornography. We know that that's what they mean because that's how they've meant it for a long time.
Mhm.
Um, there is also a provision in Project 2025 that would empower parents to sue schools through a private right of action for basically teaching their kids anything they don't want their kids to learn.
Mhm.
And they would be given strict scrutiny, which fundamentally just means it'd be very easy for parents to win those lawsuits. Um, and we know that sex ed would be the first on the chopping block because for schools that don't want to get sued under this new legal regime, should it get established, because it's the thing that parents are most likely to freak out about. So they're coming for sex ed in multiple ways that we have to keep um, our eyes on. Uh, yeah. So our opposition has known sex ed is powerful for a long time. I think we haven't spent as much energy on the left organizing for it. And that is part of why EducateUs exists. We're trying to shift that. I think it's really important to know how popular sex education is. This is actually a slide from Planned Parenthood, from our friends at Planned Parenthood, who did this study in 2023. Um, it is so very popular. 96% of parents want it to be taught in high school, 84% in middle school. They wanted to be age appropriate, comprehensive, and fact based. They wanted to cover a wide range of topics. Um, and by the way, Republicans support it too. When you scratch the surface in the privacy of their own homes, they also don't want to teach their kids sex education and do want their kids to have it. It is so important to know that this issue is popular. Would these numbers be exactly the same in Arizona? I would bet they'd be a little lower, but even if they're 10% lower, you still have a strong majority, right? So it's really important not to fall prey to the framing of our opposition, which is that this is a taboo or controversial issue. The vast majority of Americans don't think it is. They just don't do anything about it. It's not an issue that raises to the top of their list. And that's really where the challenge is actually to find the people who already will tell pollsters, yeah, sure, this should be happening, but they're not ready to stick their necks out about it. And
There's
so,
a quick question
yeah.
in the chat from Tori. I'm interested in the historical trigger. Why was the 90s a key point on the timeline of this?
Oh, fun. Yes, they are loud, but we are many. I love that. Uh, a little fun history. So, in okay, it starts with the Civil Rights Act and the Civil Rights legislation of the 1960s. Civil Rights Act gets passed, including the Voting Rights Act. Um, and a lot of anti-discrimination legislation along racial lines. In the 70s, evangelical Christian nationalist universities are chafing at this stuff because they want to be able to be racist, straight up. And they're going to lose their federal funding if they keep being as racist as they have been. Specifically, the case was about Bob Jones University uh, banning interracial dating on campus. And they were fighting to not lose they were fighting to retain the right to ban interracial dating and not lose their federal funding over it. They were fighting this incredibly unpopular fight in the courts. And they decided that they needed a different issue to unify the sort of Christian right around, which wasn't even considered the Christian right at the time. You know, in 1973, when Roe v. Wade was handed down, the Southern Baptist Convention supported it and published
Mhm.
like letters supporting it. And literally a bunch of sort of the first Christian right organizers in this country in the 70s got together in a room and were like, what issue do we need to pick on so that we're not like the people who are fighting to stay racist and we can distract everybody and have some issue to unify around? And they picked abortion. And they had to go around and convince their rank and file church members that abortion was their issue. Because at that point, most church members considered it sort of none of their business. But they started to whip up this frenzy about abortion, which became sort of attack on women's reproductive freedom. And that sort of morphed into attack on sex education in the schools. And then they got Reagan in the White House. This sort of core group of people helped to elect Reagan. And then it took a while for them with Reagan to start passing bills, including the funding for abstinence education. So by the time it actually got enacted, it was the early 90s. So that's where that comes from. It was a great question.
The other question there too is, are there studies on the relationship between sex ed and influencing kids to be pro-abortion?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never seen one, but it's a good question.
Mhm.
Should sex ed be required by all students or only parental permission? Um, Most states and municipalities have opt-out policies where parents who strongly object on sex ed can opt their kids out of sex ed. Some are fighting for opt-in policies. Opt-in policies are terrible if you support access to sex education. As you might imagine, parents are busy. Kids are embarrassed to give their parents the permission slip. A lot fewer kids get sex ed when it's opt-in versus opt-out. But I think that it's hard to imagine a place in the country that is fully mandated with no opt-out at this point. I'm not aware of anywhere in the country where that's currently policy. Um, okay, I'm gonna keep going. We'll definitely have time for questions
Yeah.
after. Um, so even though sex ed is very popular, most people who support it think it is unpopular because the right has done a really successful job at convincing us that it's a taboo, controversial, divisive issue, even though, as you've seen with the data, it is not. That leads people to be really reluctant to speak up about sex education because they think they're the only one and everyone around them is going to judge them or attack them. And that silence gives room for misinformation to spread and creates a vicious cycle. This is even worse among the political class than the general population. You cannot find a politician that doesn't think this is a controversial issue. It's so hard. Every politician thinks this is a hot button issue, even though the hard data say that it is not. The thing to do about pluralistic ignorance is speak up, right? Is explain it to people, is like literally show the data from this slide that I just showed and be like, actually, everybody supports it. Just about everyone supports it. Republicans support sex education. And we'll look at some other findings about that too. So it's really important to speak up, not just for sex education, but to help educate the people you know who think it's a controversial issue, that it's just not. And to sort of pop that bubble. Education is the cure for pluralistic ignorance, which is like the sociological term for this dynamic where something is popular, but everyone who supports it thinks that they hold a minority view.
Mhm.
Um, there's also just plain ignorance, as I mentioned, because sex ed is pretty bad in this country. Most people don't know what we mean when we say sex education. We find that many people, when they see this chart, think, oh, I want my kids to have this. They get really excited about it. People want their kids to have consent education. They want their kids to learn about
Mhm.
how to identify a trusted adult. Like they want their kids to have this information. By and large, they really do, but they think sex education is a different, scarier thing because they've heard a lot of BS, honestly. We saw this happen up here in Worcester, Massachusetts. A few years ago, there was a fight over sex ed, which we won and implemented a really great new curriculum. And then the opposition was running an opt-out campaign, trying to get as many parents as possible to opt out of sex ed because they'd lost the fight at the school board level. And they were spreading just absolute lies about what was in the curriculum. And we held a like parent information night, and a colleague of mine had a parent come up to her afterwards and say, I'm so glad that my kid is getting all of this. It's really great. I opted her out of that other thing, but I'm really glad she's getting this. And that other thing was she had opted her kids out of sex education, but she didn't recognize it as the same thing because the opposition was telling just absolute lies about what was in sex education. So when we don't tell people what sex education is, the opposition is going ahead and filling everyone's heads with absolute fiction. Um, so we have to speak up for it to combat pluralistic ignorance, but also just plain ignorance. We know that support for sex ed is growing. Our own research has found the baseline sample in our message study, even before they hear any of our messages, has increased year on year 7%. And when we factor in that our sample includes both voters and non-voters, um, and how many voters there are out of non-voters, there's a strong majority of people before they even hear a message from us ready to vote for a pro-sex ed candidate. But also, um, wait, is my sorry, my presenter notes just got weird for a second. You can still all see the presentation, right?
Yes.
So, what do? We have all this info. We know we're in the majority.
Question. So here in Arizona, we have kind of a weird setup for some of our school districts. Wild West, like our Central Phoenix School District, Phoenix Union has 13 feeder districts that are K-8 schools, or school districts.
Yep,
So it's a little bit different, it's not like the Phoenix, like Chicago Public Schools or
right.
LA County or whatever. So we have a couple of suburbs that I'm thinking of specifically, like Scottsdale Unified, Paradise Valley Unified, both won with what I would say is these are nonpartisan seats, obviously, but left leaning, definitely pro public education. But also they kind of got in by the skin of their teeth. Um, and seeing, like, I just feel like there's such an opportunity there right now because they have both districts have a majority pro public education board. but the narrative is being driven by these purity culture Christian nationalists. So, like, if I was a parent in one of those districts, or I wanted to get this into my district while I could, not knowing what the election is going to bring in 26,
Yeah.
where would, and I know you have the toolkit, but like, how would you start? If you could
I mean,
maybe just give
I
us
would
a
start
Cliff's Notes.
by the tool I shared where you can reach out to your school board members and tell them you want them to champion sex ed. I would
Mhm.
send them to that and see who responds. When we send that to you you can send it on your behalf. You can download that then and email your school board member if you already know your school board members. But if you don't, we do the work of figuring out how to email your school board members for you. But we CC you when we send that email because we want to create a relationship between you and your school board member. We don't need to be there unless we can be supportive. So I would start by reaching out to, pro public school, pro education school board members. It's horrible to have to say that some school board members are not pro education, but we know that's true. And seeing who maybe wants to be a champion there.
Mhm. And now that we're saying this, we have a legal intern right now, and he helped. We have these Know Your Rights booklets that we have digitally that we will send out. We usually try to do it in the beginning parts of, right after an election cycle. So there's one for parents, teachers, or educators and students, like things like forcing kids to pray in school or something like that. It just lets you know what your rights are if somebody oversteps their bounds. So he researched. I know he struggled with a couple of the smaller counties here, but we do have that information currently, at least through 2026, assuming that there are no resignations or anything like that. If you need that information too, Jaclyn, I'm sure that we would probably be able to share,
Yeah,
be
that'd be
happy to
great.
share
If
that
we
with
already
you.
know who's maybe sympathetic, that's a great place to
Mhm.
start. But I think them hearing from constituents is better than them hearing from us.
Absolutely. But yeah, so how, like you being here and folks on the call who may live in some of those districts
Yeah.
where they have, like, this is such a great opportunity to start driving the narrative, because it's frustrating when the narrative is being driven by really dishonest, fear-mongering people.
Yeah, they're
Um,
dishonest about what's in sex ed, the impacts of sex ed, but they're also dishonest about how popular it is or is not, right? They're just lying on every level. I'm going to drop that tool again. If you fill out this tiny little form, it takes just a second. We will connect you with your school board member on this issue.
that is fantastic. Um,
And we also have
may,
Spanish language translation of the guide for folks who are primarily Spanish speakers. It's also on the same page.
may I ask where you get, if you don't mind me asking, where your funding comes from?
I mean, our funding, because we're a 501(c)(4)
Or
organization,
yeah.
is largely individual donors.
Wow, that's incredible. And you guys have been in existence for how long?
Just a little over 3 years. I founded
Really,
it in the fall of 2021. Yeah.
wow, that's just so impressive to be able to pull this off in 3 short years, and to have that kind of support and to do the programming that you do. Um, how, Farrell's asking how many individual donors?
Uh, Under 100 per year, I definitely would say. I mean, we have a handful of major supporters, and then we're trying to build. Honestly, it's been harder for us to build the smaller. If people are interested in this nitty-gritty stuff, it's been more of a challenge for us to build a small dollar base because people who give smaller donations sort of on a regular basis are sort of already locked in usually, and sort of like these are the things I give to, and like being the new kid on the block, it can be hard to break into that. Um,
Mhm.
so that's something we're starting to figure out how to build right now.
And am I correct? Did you also say that you are also uh, creating a legal director role for your organization? Is that right?
We are not quite hiring a legal director yet, but we are getting ready to launch a 501(c)(3) partner organization, and that will definitely have a sex ed legal defense fund kind of project under it, because Lord knows we need it. So we're
No.
fundraising for that right now as well, but that's a little less far along.
Hmm. Um, so I had a question and now I can't remember what it is. Thank you so much. Middle age, it's so much fun. Um, So there was something where somebody said to answer that one question that apparently in Europe they use hand signals when children aren't safe or something. If anybody knows about that, please
Yeah.
feel free to put that in the chat. I remember what my question is. So how how is what's happening right now at a national level? I mean, it's so hard right now to make
I
predictions.
mean,
I don't know
it's
if you'll
such
be able to answer.
chaos right now, basically. Um, I mean, I will say this about trafficking that well, that's a whole other conversation. You know what? I'm not going to
Yeah,
say trafficking. Um, right now there's a lot of chaos, right? So there have been executive orders telling schools that receive federal funding, which is nearly every school, that they can acknowledge trans people exist. And, there's been some terrible executive orders. Those executive orders don't have the force of law. And I just want
yeah,
to say that out loud. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but is my deep understanding that those executive orders are love notes, wishes, like they are not laws. We do know that they're trying to dismantle the Department of Education. They're trying to pull back a lot of funding for schools. That's all being fought out in the courts. What that means for sex ed right now is people are scared, educators are scared, schools are scared. They also are operating on tighter budgets and more financial insecurity. And oftentimes sex ed gets cut in those times because it gets seen as an extra, although obviously I would argue that it is not an extra, that it is a core subject that we all need to teach. Um, so right now, nothing enforceable has happened at the national level. It's all getting fought out.
yeah. Um,
There's a whole conversation about hand signals happening.
I know, right? Let's see, not sure. Also, I don't think assaults are impulsive. That just suggests that men can't control themselves, don't rape their boss or hit their coworker. It's the women that they can do that with. Yep, and definitely. Um, so I'm not really seeing any more questions here in the chat. So I'm going to give everybody a last chance because I feel like you gave such a comprehensive presentation. You didn't really leave any stone unturned.
Well, I'm very thorough. There is a question about private and charter schools in Arizona. I think that is that we focus only on public schools at the moment, just because we're a three-person staff. Like we're a small organization, and we only can do one, so many things. Um, I think that so I have much less experience with this. I think that with private and charter schools, you have to come at it a little bit more like a consumer, right? That if your kid's in that private or charter school, you're the person who's paying the bills, you're the person who's giving them money, and you therefore are going to come to them and say, like, here's what I expect to see. Um, so it's a little bit more like consumer advocacy than it is like public policy advocacy, because that's the model that they run on. But this is not my area of expertise.
Well, and I mean, I used to be a public school teacher and I sat on a K-8 school board for 8 years. And I actually, forgive me, but when my children were younger, I did use a charter school based on the method of instruction that I really liked. And so they had essentially comprehensive sex ed there. I know that there are other schools that can choose to do that. Most of those schools don't necessarily have a governing body. They don't have to.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. It's the members of the community that can bring it. So I guess in that regard, there could be a little there. I guess if there's pluses and minuses to charter schools, if there's direct democracy there, I guess. But depending on who's running the
Yeah, I
school,
have to say, like, I don't know if this is a controversial statement at Secular AZ. We're not fans of charter schools and voucher programs because uh, it weakens public education, and we're fundamentally fans of public education. So I mostly see it as taking dollars out of public education. But yes, I do think that there's actually you're more likely to get listened to if you're a parent who's paying the bills at one of those schools than you are a parent of a public school student. So there is
Mhm.
that upside.
Um, so does your organization ever work to combat, say, other types of programming coming into schools, like, say, a LifeWise Christian curriculum
Yeah, we
or
actually had a whole session on LifeWise in January. We do a monthly series called No Means No with KNOW. No means no, and we had a one on LifeWise in January. Let me drop my our YouTube channel for you so you can see it. I'm glad that you know about LifeWise. A lot of people do not know about LifeWise, and it is very alarming. Uh,
when you look at that map, from the
that
Parents Against LifeWise organization,
that
and
map
that
is
map is terrifying. Yeah.
it
Um,
is very alarming.
Yeah, and we're actually going to have the folks from LifeWise or the Parents Against LifeWise. They have
Oh,
changed their
good.
name to Secular Education Association.
Oh, good.
Um, they're based in Ohio, and we all
Yes.
definitely share a lot of the same values and advocate for the same things and fight against the same things. They pointed out to us that we have a school here in Maricopa County in the Deer Valley Unified School District that's at like stage 8 or 9 or something, which when it gets that bad, then forget it, they're in. And then Peoria Unified, where we have a Christian nationalist cult member majority board over there. They also have a couple of schools that are at like a level 6, and they were like, that's when you really have to worry. So that'll be an important conversation for us to have here. And I imagine that it's probably even more so in the rural spaces in Arizona. That's just
Yeah,
my guess,
absolutely.
though.
Because of course we care about LifeWise because LifeWise, for those who don't know, and you should absolutely come to the session on LifeWise, is busing young people, elementary school kids, out of school during school hours, taking them to a third location. Sometimes it's a church, sometimes it's somebody's house with unaccredited adults, sometimes without a background check, and preaching right-wing evangelical values to them, including abstinence, all kinds of gross abstinence and shame-based propaganda around sex. So yeah, this is absolutely an issue that we care deeply about. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And they're
Yeah.
targeting unchurched kids. Like they're using a loophole that's supposed to be for young people who like need to go to their church or temple to get religious education. They need to like leave early because they have something happening at their place of worship, and they're using it to get kids who aren't affiliated with a church and convert them. And it's just almost nothing makes me as apoplectic as that.
And that religious release time, I don't know if that's the right
It's
term.
release time for religious instruction, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, RTRI,
Yeah.
that's right. That's existed in Arizona. We have a huge LDS population here. So we get complaints all the time from folks out maybe in the East Valley, Queen Creek, Gilbert, Higley, Chandler, complaining, but it's like a deal that's kind of been worked out. We just found out too that now in Southern Arizona, Vale School District has entered in a partnership with the LDS Church where they're going to be building a building there on the campus. I mean, it's truly wild what's happening. We have another district in I think it's Camp Verde or another rural space somewhere in Yavapai County where they are teaching a Bible study class as an elective open to I think freshmen to seniors during school hours. And here's why I want to talk too about why it's so important. And I'm really not trying to do an ad right now, but this is why it's so important to support the work that we do, because it's difficult for us to find plaintiffs in these spaces, and if we can grow this legal department of ours and the really important work that we can do and show folks in these rural spaces that we have the folks that will back you up and you don't have to hide anymore. We can find a plaintiff in that area. But as it stands right now, the woman who brought this to our attention, when she said something at her last school board meeting or city council meeting or something, they vandalized her car, and she and her husband are business owners, so she doesn't speak up anymore.
Wow.
Like this is what we are up against, and this is why we need everybody to really pay attention to what's going on in their local school districts. Maybe if Lindsay, if you can find it, or Diane or somebody, there's this really crazy map from LifeWise,
Woof.
and the number of Christian nationalists that just walk amongst us is terrifying. But again, it's probably just one person in that district. And the way that the secular education organization or whatever they're called now said is that these petitions can be signed by anybody throughout the United States. So it's not as if the folks in this, in Wilson School District or Peoria School District, it could be a bunch of evangelicals from Texas, Ohio, Florida, you don't even know. And so once that's pushed through and the board considers it, it's like nearly impossible to get them out.
Yeah,
So,
it's truly terrifying. I feel like it's one of the most undercovered stories in education right now, if I'm being honest.
mhm. I know that there's at least one local journalist on this call right now, so I'm glad that they are getting this kind of information because they're doing really important work about the Christian nationalist overreach and seeping into our school boards and our local schools.
Yeah, I think
Um,
we need to sound the alarm about LifeWise so loudly because it's so much easier to keep them out of a school district than to, like, as you said, to get rid of them once they're in. It's so much easier to keep them out.
mhm.
But people don't know. It sounds very innocent. They're very good at presenting it in a way that sounds innocent.
And there's food there, there's music when
There's free
they
t-shirts and candy and yeah, and their friends are
Mhm.
going.
It's really insidious, but again, but to want to teach kids about how their bodies work and how
Yeah.
to what consent means and how to put boundaries up. Now we're the indoctrinators. Give me a break.
Yep.
Like this is indoctrination.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I wish that pointing out hypocrisy actually worked in terms of convincing anyone. It doesn't, but you could not be more right about it.
Uh-huh. It's very frustrating.
Yes.
So well, look, we made it. See, I knew we'd always have something to talk about.
There's always something to talk about.
Right? So, these have been dubbed Rage Fridays, because of things like LifeWise and the insidious nature of these folks who are just dishonestly driving this false narrative. So in these times of extreme everything, what gives you hope, Jaclyn?
Um, I've shifted in recent decade my relationship to hope. I don't wait to feel hope. Some days I feel hopeful and some days I don't feel hopeful. I'm really a student of Rebecca Solnit, who wrote a wonderful book during the Iraq War called Hope in the Dark. And what she says, and I'm paraphrasing it much worse than what she would say, but what she fundamentally says is hope is a discipline, it's a practice. If we act as though there's no hope, then there's definitely not going to be any hope of change because we're going to do nothing. If we act as though there's hope of change, sometimes we will succeed at creating change. And so I make it much more my business to produce hope than it is to feel hope.
That is such a good answer.
Thank
I
you.
love I love that answer. Oh my gosh. Well, you just gave me hope, now Rage Friday, I'm ready for the weekend. We've got some really good events happening. I know that a lot of people here locally might be going to the SOS Gala. I know that some of us in Secular AZ and other nonprofit organizations are going to be going to a drag bingo on Sunday
Oh, no,
night.
I wish I could come with you.
Yeah, so and now, I mean, I was already excited about that, but now I'm about ready to create some hope, you know?
Excellent. Go produce hope, everyone.
I'm going to. All right, thank you so much, Jaclyn Friedman
Thank
with
you. Thanks everyone for
Educate
having
Us.
me and for all the
Appreciate
work that
you.
you do.
Yep. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.